Building in public is giving people the opportunity to connect with you before you're done doing the thing you want to do, instead of just doing your thing and then hoping that they will come and buy.
I am thrilled to bring on the guest, Arvid Kahl.
Every other coder could probably build the same thing you're building, maybe even better. So instead of hiding your ideas, associate them with you.
He is a passionate believer in the power of sharing your journey.
Makes it so much easier to build the business and the product, and to feel like you're on the right track because you're getting meaningful feedback.
Join us as we unpack his insights on balancing transparency with business strategy.
I've seen so many people who got copycatted and then the community just pounced on that person. Like they reported them on Twitter. They kind of got their email provider to shut down their emails. The benefit of building in public is that
Arvid, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Let's get transparent. That's really nice. Thanks for having me.
I love it. Let's start with what is, I think there's some people that don't know, what is building in public entail? What does that mean?
Well, it's really like sharing your journey. That's like the core of it. If you don't even want to talk about building, just building a business in public, building a product in public, building a movement in public, whatever you want to build, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to accomplish, you can either do it hidden in your basement, which, a lot of software engineers, that's where I come from. That's what we do, right? We do the thing, we build, and then eventually we go public, we market or whatever. Tends to be problematic, and building in public is the opposite of that. Building in public is enrolling people in your journey, like giving people the opportunity to connect with you before you're done doing the thing you want to do, and in that help you get to where you want to go. Right? This is a bit of an abstract definition, I guess. If you want to talk about a software business, really, it's starting with your idea, sharing it with people, talking to them, getting information. What do you need? What do you want? Like, what do you already have? What do you use? What do you pay for? Could I build something better? And then step by step, actually building it in front of them, with them, sharing the ups and downs of that journey, right? Oh, wow, I got 20 new users today, the good stuff. And the thing was just down for 5 hours and I lost 4 paying customers, the bad stuff, right? All of these things are part of this effort to build real relationships with people, building connection with your peers, your other founders around you, other software engineers that you might want to work with, partner in the future, or even your customers, depending where they are hanging out, right? That's what building in public is. It's involving others in your journey instead of just, doing your thing and then hoping that they will come and buy, right? It's not build it and they will come. It's kind of build it in public and they might come.
So it's product validation, right? Because you're talking about new features you're working on, or maybe problems with the new features. It's also a little bit marketing, where you're hopefully trying to get some people excited about the product before it's even launched.
Yeah.
So could I build in public and basically have it be just for me if I'm like the one reader of my own blog? Is that still building in public, or is it with the intention that someone else in my theoretical audience is going to read this?
Yeah, well, that's actually an interesting view on this, because building in public does not necessarily mean that you get all the attention right now. It could also just be leaving traces of what you're doing for others to later find. Like a lot of projects, even good blog posts, are discovered like years after they were made, right? So just you putting out the information that you have and just kind of showing how much you care about it, that will attract others. And if you have this trail of content, of product updates, of sharing challenges, sharing customer testimonials, whatever it might be you do, and we can get into the details of this later. Whatever it is, leaves this trace that others might find and then kind of track it back to where you are today, which is probably the place where you have something to sell or you have something to do where you need more people, right? It's not all about money. It's also just about involvement, about taking action. You could have a political action committee, no, maybe not a PAC, but you have a group of people doing something like a grassroots movement that is built in public around the community, from within the community. Doesn't even have to be software, right? So that's what it is. It's involving a community. Maybe that's the most important part here. Doing it just for yourself? No, but doing it for other people now or eventually? Yes.
Got it. I love that. So I have to ask, was there a pivotal moment where you kind of became a believer in build in public? Was it a specific project, I'm guessing?
Yeah, for me, building in public started happening when I started writing online. So I come from a software background, and I built several software businesses myself and with others that went maybe a little bit somewhere. Most of them went nowhere. And I had a pretty successful one back in 2017 to 2019, FeedBack Panda. Can talk about that too. We built it, we sold it, it was great. After that, I started actually like writing about my experience and my journey and trying to help other founders get to like a foundational baseline from where they could build their own businesses. And that's when I really discovered building in public. So my first business was not really built in public as such, just as a clear caveat here, right? Building in public with software businesses has been something I've been doing ever since I sold my first one. So when I first learned of building in public, it was through the Twitter community in which I started to be more active. Twitter used to be a place where a lot of people were really happy and software engineers. Now it's a place where people are just software engineers and either happy or extremely mad at each other. But Twitter was the community where the indie hackers, the entrepreneurs, like back when it was called entrepreneurship ride along, before it was even indie hacking and all that kind of stuff. Bootstrapping was just like small business, right? Back when that was the thing, 2017, 2015, even that's where I found this community. And I saw people do it. I saw people stand out and share more than others. And I thought, that's interesting. I wonder how I could do this now that I'm a writer. And I started sharing my process. I started involving people in pitching topics and having little discussions on Twitter and figuring out, there's resonance here. I could dive deeper into this. And then I asked somebody, well, what's your opinion? And I pulled that in. And from that opinion, I crafted an article. Like it was involving the people that were going to read it in the process of writing it. So that was always the build in public approach when it comes to writing that I used. And I wrote my first book mostly by myself because that's what I knew back in the day, right? I was an engineer. I code in my basement. Literally at that point, and still to this day, I'm currently in my basement as well, because that I will never get rid of. That nerd basement thing is always going to be accompanying me on my journey. But back then, it was like, I better just keep to myself, write, and then publish and hope that people like it. And with my first book, I figured out, I got so much feedback after I started selling it from people that were like, oh, this is great. I want to learn more about this. And could you give me more on this? I didn't really understand it. I got a lot of reader feedback, which was really nice. So when I wrote my second book, which was kind of a zoom in on one portion of my first book, the first book was my whole journey. The second book was about how can I find my audience and find problems that they might have? How can I build a profitable business from this? That's what the second one was. I chose to write that in public with people. So I drafted it as I wrote my blog posts on the topic. So I had a list of things I wanted in the book. So I wrote a blog post every single week for a couple months. And then I pulled them all together and within a month finished the book, at the first draft of the book, because the book was by far not finished. I think like probably 70-80% of the book was changed in the next step, which was beta readers. I had 500 people beta read this book off and on through a platform that I used where people could just comment on each word and ask me questions about it. This significantly impacted what the book turned out to be. And it became a best-selling success. Like the first one, funny enough, the first one was just like, because it was so overwhelmingly rich, it's like 600 pages of founder stuff, which people seem to like. But the second one was much smaller, but much more precise because people told me, hey, this needs to be refined. This is craft. You can get rid of that. And I did. So the people who were going to buy the book told me what they wanted to see in the book. That was the process. And ever since I released that book and it became successful, I've been doing the same in my software efforts. I built 2 businesses, software businesses in the meantime. One is called Permanent Link. That's kind of a thing that I built because I needed links that fit in my books. And even if the website that they link to goes down, they link to something else. I built that in public with the people that were going to be using it. So it's a profitable, small SaaS business that is used by authors and marketers all over the place because they need links that don't break, right? In emails and books, wherever you can't change the link, you get like a forwarding system pretty much. And I recently started a new business called Podline.fm, which helps podcasters get voice messages from their audience and then use them in the podcast themselves. So both of these are being built and have been built in public. And I get so much interesting feedback from other founders about business choices that I made, pricing or those kind of things, right? From other engineers about ways that I implement things or bugs that they found because they dug into it and they, used Internet Explorer 4.0 and told me that there's like an HTML rendering bug or whatever. And I get an interesting feedback from potential and actual customers, the people who use it, who I'm also connected with because I share my journey. I talk about podcasting a lot. I talk about building businesses a lot, right? So you meet the people that are going to be your customers in the future. So I get all this feedback just from sharing things, which is spectacular. It makes it so much easier to build the thing, the business and the product, and to feel like you're on the right track because you're getting meaningful feedback.
Yeah. So my next question was going to be, what are some of the benefits? But I think you just kind of articulated them, which is you're getting a ton of feedback. Like that is, I think, is that probably the biggest benefit, is just the sheer amount of feedback?
Yeah, it's the feedback cycles. They're incredibly tight, right? Like you put something out, you get comments immediately because people spend way too much time on social media. So you can work that into your next iteration. And that tends to be this kind of self-enriching loop, right? You do something, people say something, you react to it. That encourages them to invest even more time into the next reply. It's a kind of hook that just keeps going, right? The cycle that just keeps rolling. It's incredibly useful. And of course, there are risks that you're in an echo chamber, or that you only get like people's, the mom test, the book by Rob Fitzpatrick. Like, don't ask your mom if your idea is good, because your mom is always going to say great, right? Mm-hmm. So you shouldn't ask the people who really like you about if you should do a thing or not. But if you build it in public, you don't try to push it on them, right? You just build it. If there is demand, then it will show, and it will show in the comments and the feedback that you get as well. So yes, feedback is a massive one of the biggest, maybe the biggest, but I think there is a bigger one, and that may be one that is not completely obvious, but particularly for people who are introverts, who don't want to show up in public, right? Who don't want to be on social media, who don't want to post, who don't want to go viral or whatever. The benefit of building in public, and this is something that extroverts and introverts can easily do, it just depends on how you do it, we can get to that, is that over time, no matter how successful the thing that you're building actually is, it might be a business that explodes and becomes super viral, and it becomes hyper profitable or whatever, that could happen, that would be great, but it's quite likely that it's growing slowly or not growing at all. No matter what happens to the business, your personal reputation as a reliable, authentic, honest person sharing an interesting and motivating story with others, that just keeps growing. Like it transcends the success of your business. If it fails, now you have an interesting story to tell people, to teach them what you learned from failing, right? You become somebody who can help them avoid the mistakes that they might make. If it's a good story, well, survivorship bias and all that aside, you can tell them a way of how you approached it that they might be able to replicate. So this is extremely helpful because it transcends the individual project you might be building. If you look at founders like Peter Levels.io on Twitter, he's been building 70 different businesses, 60 out of which failed horribly. He has this wonderful list. I think it's his pinned tweet on Twitter. It's like, here are all the things that I did. And it's like 74 or so items, and 4 of them are profitable, and the rest of them is just gone. But every single one has created a bit more reputation for him and a bit more encouragement in his group of friends and peers to maybe help him get the next one up and running and maybe make that a success. Because if people see Peter Levels is launching a new business, they're going to open that page. They're going to look at it because they know what he builds is interesting, and maybe this is going to be the next one, right? Yeah. There's an anticipation, there's an investment, an emotional investment, and often enough a monetary investment coming from keeping people interested and keeping people kind of in the state of anticipation of what's going to be next. So that over time throughout projects, massive value. Like I said, I've written 2 books, I've released a course, I've done 2 businesses. I know that the next thing I'm going to do is going to have hundreds of thousands of people look at it the first day because people are interested in what I'm building. So it's a cumulative effect.
I love that. Yeah, it's like compounding, and it's
absolutely.
I didn't think that by you sharing your journey. So is this normally on like your personal blog? So if you're sharing your journey on your personal blog, even if the business fails, number one, I share a lot of coding stuff. I still Google stuff all the time and find one of my blog posts from 8 years ago. So there's that, like you might solve your own coding problems in the future, but also all these business decisions and both yourself, but other people will trust you a lot more, seeing your thought process and what went wrong and the assumptions you made and all that stuff. I love this.
Yeah, precisely. It's like journaling. You journal and kind of externalize journaling. Most journaling is really for yourself to reflect and to get the things out of your mind that bother you. But in putting them out there, you're creating history books for your own life, which is really cool, right? You have this paper trail. It's extremely valuable. And it's something that other people can also see your journey through, right? They can look at the old stuff, the new stuff, and say, that's how far they've come.
For engineers, self-promotion can feel like a dirty word. But Arvid brought up a good point that if you build a tool for a specific type of person, it doesn't feel bad to promote that tool. You're helping them. He breaks self-promotion down into 2 different types: the selfish promotion
and the customer-centric promotion. You'll want to listen to it. Stay tuned.
So part of the goal with building a public is promotion. So how do you balance authenticity with self-promotion in these?
I think that's the core question of building in public, like beyond like how can I stay like consistent and how can I find interesting things to share. That's kind of the functional approach. This is more the metaphysical approach, right? Like how can I stay myself in front of others, right? Because in a way, all interactions on social media and even this conversation is partially performative, right?
Yes.
We as people who try to help other people do things as teachers, we have always a little bit of performance in there to make it interesting, to make it exciting, to make it approachable, and to allow some people to select in and other people to select out, right? That's kind of why we perform a certain way. So any building a public effort is its own nature as a social media act, also performative. And authenticity and performance are very hard to combine, right? It's hard to say, this is just me, and then act more like yourself. Like, it's just really, really tough to get that right. The only thing that I have found is just be honest with people. Like, do not make things up. And then you can promise things. You can share your dreams and you can be as performative as you want in that regard, right? You can say, hey, I really want to get this done by next year. So I'm setting this challenge, like every month I'm going to grow this business by like 10%. There's nothing performative about dreaming big and trying to make it happen. But you also have to share, hey, this month I grew by like -2%. I guess I have a problem. That needs to come as well, right? Honesty is the core motivation of building in public. And honesty doesn't mean saying everything you think. It's just when you choose to say it, you have to actually mean it. Like you can't say the company that I work for has a perfect product that has 0 bugs and is the cheapest one that could ever be made. Right? That's flat out lie. It's unrealistic. And it doesn't really build any meaningful connection between you and the people who follow you. But when you say, I used to work for this company, I probably wouldn't have said anything about it back then. But now it's like, hey, we really didn't make smart choices here. We could have done this, or we thought about that. And I thought we could do this, but I didn't speak up. Like anything that allows people to relate to you because they also work in businesses where this happens is an effort of building your personal brand, let's just call it that, or platform, I think it's a better phrase, your personal presence as an expert, a trustworthy expert in the space. So keep it honest, censor yourself as much as you need to, because we all are bound to agreements, right? If you were to ask me how much I sold my business for in 2019, I could tell you a life-changing amount of money because that's legally what I'm allowed to say about it. You don't have to share more than you would like to share. And you obviously be careful not to overshare in the sense of they give people too much. If you do screenshots of your product, you might not want to share which email you log in with, and you might not want to share what the name of your database is or where your database is located, right? These little things are dangerous to your business because the people who know how to do very negative things to your business, they will figure this out too. And some people just have too much time on their hands. Generally, just honestly sharing what you have to say, what you feel, what you think can build relationships and connection with people. That's the way you do it.
I love it. Okay, so I have a different type of question here. How true is this statement? Building in public is beneficial for all software products.
Okay, let me answer with all generalizations are wrong.
Okay.
There's a lot of nuance here, right? Building in public is something that is particularly useful in the beginning of a product's journey or the beginning of your own founder or developer journey. That is, I guess, the main time-based thing. Like the bigger the business gets, building in public kind of has diminishing returns. There are stories out there by companies like Transistor FM. That's where I host my podcast. It's built by a couple indie hackers, Justin Jackson, John Buda, pretty big people in the community. And they were at some point extremely open. They had an open startup page. They had their whole metrics, their payment metrics, their Stripe metrics linked openly available through Baremetrics at that point, so you could dive into the exact payments that anonymized, but still, people did, and how much the categories of how old those people were or how long they were with the business. You could dive into the data. And in the beginning, that was interesting because it created buzz, it created interest in people. Over time, it became a potential drawback because people could dive into your data better than you could dive into your data. And if it's payment information and people see, most of these customers, like 95%, stick around for exactly 8 months and then they quit. Now we could build something that, monetizes for the same exact amount in half a year, and we could make more money and have a feature parity or whatever. People pull out information from these things that you might not want them to pull out because it's like a business secret, really. So there are risks, obviously, to sharing over time, but until you get there, it's a wonderful method. It's kind of on the surface, it's a marketing effort, right? Marketing for your product, your business, and for yourself on all 3 layers. It becomes less effective, or it shifts its nature. Some founders of larger businesses, they build in public more on a abstract level. They talk about how they are approaching their business. They don't share the specific numbers. They say, I'm somewhere between 50 and 70K MRR or whatever. But here is how I approach building business partnerships. Here is how I approach scaling, like with a big partner, or doing this. The people at Fathom Analytics do it so well. Jack Ellis and Paul Jarvis, they share information about how they approach their scalable architecture stuff, right? There's nothing about exactly how much money they make, but you can literally see the code that runs the business, at least parts of it, which is really cool, right? You can use it in different ways over time. So that's the one axis. The other axis is the kind of business you're building. Like, obviously, there are software projects out there that are kind of built on secretive technology, right? On patents, on things that you don't want anybody even to know about. There's a post out there about, I think, referral systems. Forgot who posted it. I might give you the link so you can put it in the show notes. Ryan Culp. Don't put it in the show notes. Here it is. Ryan Culp wrote a post about referral systems, and he said it really depends on the kind of how do you have an edge? Does having access to your service, your software as a service business, give the person that is using it an edge over other people in their field? If that's the case, think of financial trading, right? They use your software and it's like 10 milliseconds faster than the other tool. They're never going to tell anybody about your tool. Because if they were, then their profits would go down. Their edge is secrecy. But that means that your efforts at building in public, they might not work because people are not going to talk about your stuff. They're not even going to tell others that they use it. They're not going to like the page because then somebody else might see them like the page and find the product. So there's a lot of psychology behind this. But the other side of the spectrum is extreme shareability. FeedBack Panda, the business that I built with my partner, Danielle, we built this for online English teachers, which she was at the time. So I kind of built the product for her, and then we started selling it to other people. And teachers, online teachers needing to do feedback, doesn't really matter the specifics. It was a feedback tool for online English teachers. Teachers love teaching. They love teaching teachers. Teachers love sharing. So the first teacher who found our tool and started using it was like, oh my God, I need to tell everybody I know about this tool because I just saved 2 hours a day. You all could save 2 hours a day. It was a very positive, very helpful community. If you build tools in such a community, and that's where I'm at too with writers and with podcasters, it's pretty much a big family of people who kind of want to see each other succeed because we might compete in sales and stuff, but it's kind of a very friendly competition, right? I mention your book, you mention my book, we both sell a book, or you listen to my show, I listen to yours, that kind of stuff. In these communities, building a public is highly, highly useful because everybody will try to amplify something that benefits everybody in the field. So it depends not on the tool, not on the technicality of the tool, but more on the secrecy or openness of the market for which you create this tool.
Perfect. So you just transitioned to my next question. Are there places where people can find inspiration and maybe like communities or sub-communities? Because it's definitely, I agree with you on authors. I agree with you on, and my spouse is in like theater. So in like theater circles, they do a lot of like cross promoting and just sharing everyone's work. What are like the hubs for software creators to build in public?
Definitely Twitter is a big community for this. Like they've been around, like people who build in public have been on Twitter since 2006 or 7 when it came up in the first years of its life. People used it as a kind of a journal, right? That's what Twitter was in the beginning. When Twitter was out, it was 140 characters and people were just like posting about whatever they did. Well, if you're a software entrepreneur back in the day, I think they called themselves micro ISV, like independent software vendors. Like if you look micro ISV, if you look that up on Google, you find blog posts from that time, 2006, 7, 9, whatever. That's the old name for micro SaaS. That before SaaS became a thing, but before people called it software as a service, it was micro ISV. And that community existed on Reddit. There is a very old subreddit called Entrepreneur Ride Along, I think. And it transitioned onto Twitter and people just started sharing little things because they knew the people who follow me, they will get it because Twitter was still very small. I would still suggest it to this day. One of the benefits of Twitter, and I'm kind of quoting from my own Twitter course here, not going to plug it, but it's one of the things that I found extremely useful in building my own audience on Twitter was leveraging lists, Twitter lists. Because imagine you find somebody who does it really well. And Peter Levels is that example. Levels.io on Twitter. Just go there, follow that guy, and figure out who follows him, who does similar things as he does, and who is on lists that Peter is also on. That's a trick, right? If you're on Twitter, I'm going to do this really fast, and you go to anybody's profile, you go to the three dots, you go to lists, and then you go to the three dots in the top corner again, and you click on lists they're on. And all of a sudden, you get a list of lists, each of which contains this particular person. And if you want to find more people like that person that do similar things in the same kind of context that they're doing, you just scroll through that list and you follow all the other lists that are on there. It's extremely powerful. All of this invites a massive influx of people who do similar things into your Twitter activity feed. And from there, you can start following them individually. You can interact with them, which is the most important part. And you can ask them questions. You see their things. You can take note. You can bookmark the post that you also want to do something like, right? They kind of, as examples, kind of a sketch file or whatever. You can do all of that just from Twitter lists. Peter himself has a Twitter list that he curates that contains people who build in public and are active and don't market like crazy. Like he has a curated Twitter list of people who are not selfish, but still building public. It's really cool. So you find those gems in the community. You just have to hang out with the right people and do this little recursion where you go to their list, follow other people, go to their lists and follow other people. That's how it goes.
Fantastic. I haven't really leveraged Twitter lists in years. So it's exciting to know that obviously there's still a lot of value in just finding tribes of people.
Yeah.
Let me take a quick detour into when you're posting your stuff there, are you marketing? Are you following best practices about how to write an engaging first tweet? Like, does this involve some, I don't want to say literacy, but some marketing savvy when you are also posting on Twitter and chatting on Twitter and the right way to get people to interact with you on Twitter?
Yeah, that is one of the hardest things about like running a business in the first place is to hit the message right? Reach the right people in the right location with the right message and not make it too salesy. I think I don't know about you, but like my background in engineering has taught me that all sales are bad. You just want to, generalize this a little here. And I had to work on myself for a long time to allow myself to market my products in front of the people who I think need them. It's a question of reframing what it is. And I get to the actual pragmatic answer. I'm just going to explain why you need to reframe it first. You talked about self-promotion just now. I believe that there are two kinds of self-promotion. There is a selfish kind of self-promotion where it's all about, hey, look at me, I made this. And then there is a selfless self-promotion that is kind of, hey, I made this for you. And this reframing of this is a thing that I created because I saw you need it, and the message that you can channel through this framing is massively different from, hey, buy this, right? It's the whole point of building in public is to build enough of a connection so that people are interested in what you have to offer without you pushing it to them. It's kind of demand-based, pull-based marketing, if you think about it like this, which is why I employed the idea of the breadcrumb earlier, right? The idea of you put your content out there, the messages, the challenges that you face, the ups, the downs, so that people can be interested in the thing you do and who does it, which is you, and then find their way to where you are right now so they can interact with you, purchase from you, partner with you, help you amplify what you have to offer, all that kind of stuff, right? You leave that out there for them to kind of claw their little way to you. And there is an offer always somewhere. You should have an offer. Maybe that's a big important part is do not expect that people will dig for the offer. They will dig for connection. So you have to provide the offer. It's like when people go to your Twitter profile and they consider if they should follow you or not. They're not going to go and sign up for your newsletter. They're not going to buy you a subscription to your SaaS. They're going to look at the content you provide. They're going to look at, is this an interesting person to follow? And then they follow you. And then they see you tweet 15, 20, 30 times. And then they think, that product is probably nice because I like the person. I like what they offer. I like the way they interact with others because they see that too. And then they check out the product and they're like, okay, this is cool. Maybe I'm going to use it like in a couple months. Don't have the budget for it right now or whatever, right? And then you keep posting and you keep interacting. And 2 months later, they're like, yeah, I guess it's time. And then they subscribe. So marketing here is a massively long-term play. The whole building a public approach is I call this eventual reciprocity. The idea that you put out so much stuff that eventually people feel like they want to and need to reciprocate with you. So that's the marketing here. It's just being there, being present, being constantly there, being consistently good and helpful, and just allowing for people to want to compensate you in the end.
I love that. And I especially love, speaking of, it's a reframe of, I built this for you, thinking about the customer. I was just thinking, if you're just starting out, I think it forces you, if you force yourself to think about the customer early on and consistently, maybe in month 1, you think the customer is this person. And then in month 2, you realize, that's not the person who needs this. It's this person instead. Yeah. So it kind of, if you reframe your promotion of just here's what I'm working on and here's why I'm working on it to here's the type of customer I have in mind, you will iterate on your customer, on your target persona so much more than most software devs ever do.
That's right. And that's the biggest problem in my own experience as an engineer trying to build businesses was I kind of skipped these massively important stages of figuring out who I want to help, figuring out the problems that they actually have, what priority they are in, and for which they actually have a budget. All of this was kind of, there'll be somebody buying this, right? Like, I'm going to build it. It's going to have all these features. And I catch myself still to this day. Earlier today, before this call, I was working on Podline and I was like, I'm building this themable system where people can, have the colors of their podcast in there. And it's an important like MVP thing for this particular product. But I was like, oh yeah. And then I can add like this little transparency layer in there. And it was like an hour later, I was like, what am I doing? Like this has no meaning to the initial success of the business if there's a little transparency here or not. I think if you start with the whole journey, your whole business journey with who do I want to help, make a list and then figure out which of these people you actually want to help. It's just spending an hour on this process that cuts short like days of development time of a tool that nobody needs, or that you don't even want to keep building because a couple weeks, couple months into the process, you figure out, I kind of hate these people. I don't want to do anything for them. So this whole process, which is the main concept in my second book that I wrote, because people ask me, how can I figure out who's right? This whole process is so important. Building a public makes it much easier because you build something for somebody else and then you figure out, those people don't need it. I should build something else for them. Or those people need this, but I went about it the wrong way. I need to build it differently. It's a massive benefit of doing it with and in front of them instead of hiding away in your little den.
Makers often worry about sharing business ideas online. And that's because we worry a competitor might steal the idea and put us out of business. I asked Arvid about this fear, and he pointed out a benefit that I had never really considered before, and it actually inoculates your company from competitors stealing your ideas. So you want to stick around.
How do you not give your competitors ideas? Maybe is a viable alternative only talking about things once they're done? Or is that just defeat the whole purpose of working in building in public?
That's exactly what it is. That is going back to the basement to code your thing in silence, right?
Yes.
And you're absolutely right that this is probably the number one fear that people have who think about, maybe I should build in public. And then they think about this and they're like, nah, I'm not going to give other people the advantage here. But you also have to think about the fact that in the software world, copying features and copying like ideas is incredibly simple. I think don't give people ideas is a historical thing for when you had a factory and you had a guy with a gun at the door. Right? You had a guy blocking, like there was a little house and a guy sat in it. And if you didn't have an ID, you didn't get in. Like that's the kind of secrecy that used to be in businesses. code bases are different. Like if you build a software product, like half of your code, the front end side and your API calls and whatever, they're pretty much public, right? You have no means to protect this. I remember like all the JavaScript scrambling that was going on and the minification and all, trying to get people to not see what your code does, which is completely reversible, and it doesn't help you. It just makes everything harder in the development process, right? In the deployment chain, in bug tracking and all that. It's just and error tracking for that matter. You now have to have source maps and what it's complicated to make things secret. Instead, your connection to your customers, these feedback loops that we talked about that are incredibly tight, they're the valuable part. It is more valuable to share your idea with the people it's for and to get to see them, oh yeah, I would pay more for this in that moment. And then you start building the minute after, then fearing that some dude from some business somewhere might see it and think, haha, we're going to drive him out of business. The reality of software engineering as a means to build a business is every other coder, particularly now with the help of ChatGPT, GitHub Copilot, and all these things, they could probably build the same thing you're building, maybe even better. So instead of hiding your ideas, associate them with you. Own the brand, like own the idea and the connection between the idea and your brand. Because the people who like you, who follow you on your journey, they will defend your idea for you.
Yes.
In face of others. I've seen so many people who got copycatted where somebody just cloned the whole thing and then the community just pounced on that person. Like they reported them on Twitter. They kind of got their email provider to shut down their emails and whatnot. Like the community will defend you if you are a person that they want to defend. So that's what I would say. Just forget. It's like, what is it? Execution matters. Ideas matter not at all. Amplify that even more. Like other people will execute the same stuff. You're going to be faster. You're going to be better connected. And that's going to be it.
I was going to say execution is what matters. And most competitors, 80% of them, it'll take them at least a year to get that out. And you will just rapidly outpace them. I didn't think about your community defending you. That is absolutely correct. And I've seen that happen. People in the comments on the Facebook ads or on the Twitter or wherever will defend you, which is a great reason to publish your idea first. Like there's some huge benefit. I didn't think of that, so I love that.
It's prior art, right? That's really what it is. This is the prior art concept in the community. It's great.
Love it. So, but let me talk about, I'm curious on, I think for me, maybe a big drawback is how much time do you put into this? If you've never written a blog post before, I feel like the first one I wrote, let's say, took me 2 days. And it wasn't even that long. And until you get into a good cadence, creating content takes a while. So how do you balance I think just the time requirements of making content?
Yeah, like expectations are rough because we, again, speaking for myself, I'm kind of a perfectionist in that, or used to be a perfectionist in that regard because, engineering is a very Boolean thing. Like you have a true and a false and that's it. There's nothing fuzzy about it, right? So either it's great or it sucks. That's kind of the perspective that I always had in content, which obviously is not true, right? You can write a masterpiece of an article and some people won't like it because they just don't like the words you picked or they don't speak your language or whatever it is, right? There are good enough reasons that it's not for everyone. So it starts with figuring out am I going to do this for and what is the minimum threshold of what they actually need. And that's interesting that you mentioned like the length of a blog post because most people don't need a blog post. They could use a Twitter thread or they could use a 4-paragraph blog post that just has a thought. Seth Godin is the best example. Seth Godin's blog is like literally just him thinking one thought, then putting it into a shape that is interesting, and that's his post for the day. He doesn't write 2,000 words. He writes 250, and they pack a punch, right? And that's hard. Like writing short content is harder than writing long form, obviously, because you could just talk about whatever you want. But your expectation shouldn't be, I'm going to write a 2,000-word blog post every week. It should just be, I want to write anything that slightly even resembles a blog post every week. Because the benefit in the beginning when you start is nobody's watching. Like nobody's going to see your mistakes anyway. If you start, like not too many people are going to be annoyed by that little mistake that you make. That problem comes a couple years in when you have thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers like I have on Twitter right now. But in the beginning, you can experiment. You can write a short thing. You can write effectively a tweet as a blog post. I've seen this too. And the more brevity you have in this, the more people are willing to come back because they don't have to invest a lot of time. You can start small. The important part is that you have consistency, right? You have to start small but regular, because there's something to the human psyche that equates seriousness with consistency. Like if you put something out every week, in a couple months, people are going to see this. They're going to see the weekly post on your blog, and they're going to say, this guy's serious about the thing that they're doing, right? This person has the willpower to keep doing this, even though they probably have other things to do as well. And it can be just one thing a week. It doesn't have to be much. You can write for 30 minutes, just a thought that you had during the week. Generally, I expect for myself that I have my thoughts at random points in time. So I have a list of topics that I just add new topics to whenever I feel like it, or I dictate something into my phone and I just take it out later and turn it into a blog post, whatever it is. I don't necessarily have sit down time to come up with ideas. Ideas come up throughout the week. I have sit down time for actually turning them into a post. That's how that happens. So I give myself flexibility in the creative world, and then I just edit it down to something that I can post, right? That's the point. So allow yourself to find these things, to mark them down, to note them down, and then just take 30 minutes, an hour, a week, and just turn it into anything that is good enough as a post, put it out there. Over time, you get into a habit and you figure it out.
Can I interrupt? So
Sure.
An hour a week is, I guess to me, a half hour does not seem like enough for this. Is this... Well, does it scale up later, or am I a slow creator?
Well, I guess an hour in 2022 is not an hour in 2024. Like I'm referencing ChatGPT and other tools like this, right? Like I'm using for my own podcast and my blog, I'm using a tool called, I think, Podium.page, which takes in an audio file and just summarizes it gives you a good title for it, gives you like the kind of the breakpoints between the topics and the little summaries per chapter, and has tags and all that, all automated. It's like 95% done at that point, right? So if you've written something, there are obviously tools out there where you could just really go to ChatGPT, post your full article, tell it, give me 5 good titles, and then create a stock image or whatever for the thing, right? Create a header image for that file, and ChatGPT will do this. I would highly recommend using ChatGPT for editing. Like, clear this up, make this more understandable. Yes. I would not recommend it for actually being like writing. Don't tell it to write an article about XYZ. That is lazy, and people will hate it because, you know, with GPTs and all these other LLMs, they have styles that you can figure out are artificial. But for the creative process in front of it, and that's where I use it too, I often go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I recently thought about this topic. And then I just write a little bit about what I thought about, and give me 10 ideas for an article around this issue. So I've written like, for 2 minutes, I just brain dumped whatever I had into ChatGPT, and that little line at the end creates an incredibly interesting list of, let's just say, 7 really crappy things that I could write about, and 3 rather good ones. And I take those 3, I modify them, put them on my list of things that I always wanted to talk about, and whenever I need something to write about, pull them in and actually brainstorm the article. So it's a great pre-creative and post-creative process. You still need to write, but anything in front and behind this process can be helped with these tools, and is very simple to use. So that saves you a lot of time. I can now dictate the article almost completely done into my phone. Like it's just, as a writer, you get to a point where you can write through your speech. Maybe not right now as I'm trying to explain it, because it's the first time I think about it. But if I have a topic that I've really thought about, I could just dictate it flat out. Couple edits takes me half an hour to get this thing done. So it definitely scales over time because you just get better at it.
Do you use like your analytics to help you know what is most important? Like, if, you know, one blog post gets 10 times the traffic of all the rest, do you use this also as, or analytics on your process?
From the start, like not even just on the blog. Like I use what is it called, Black Magic, which is a tool that was acquired by Hype Fury, very interesting indie hacker space, which is a Twitter analytics tool that lives inside of Twitter, and you can see which of your posts perform really well. Like you can not just see like how many likes they got and all that, but it actually is like a historical graph where you can see how much engagement happened over time and how intense the engagement is. If the engagement comes from your followers or from outside of your follower base, all of that, there's a lot of data there. I use this to source really, really resonant ideas. Like if there's something happening on Twitter that I was part of because I posted about it and I get a lot of massive engagement and it doesn't stop for a couple of days, then I know that this thing is really worth writing about, maybe inviting a person onto the podcast to talk to about, to keep that engagement going. And then I write about it, I put it on the blog, and I still look at those numbers too. Sometimes topics from a couple years ago come back because there's a conversation happening around them. So I try to backtrack where the actual link came from and join the conversation there to surface new ideas to then turn into new posts. So it's a very, it's not a metrics driven, but it is a connection, like a digital connection driven approach. Like where does this go? Where are the people that talk about this and how can I interact with them to bring them closer to my domain? And maybe another thing here is that I tend to start all my articles as a tweet. I have a thought, like the core of the article, I throw it out as a tweet. If I see people really engaging with that tweet, it turns into an article almost immediately because I know this resonates. If it doesn't, it goes back on the list, maybe some other day, right? So it's kind of tweet, maybe Twitter thread, article, podcast episode, and then the things that really work well, there is, at least for me, an interest to take them even further and maybe turn them into a guide, a compendium, or a book, right? Some things that resonate super well can be taken even further from the blog and be turned into an info product that creates mostly passive income. Anything where there is like a light of attention shining on it, I try to dig my claws in for the time being that the light is shining on.
We talk a lot about Twitter in this episode, but near the end, Arvid and I discuss all sorts of online communities where you might find inspiration. You'll want to take some notes.
Okay, so last question. I guess where is this movement heading? Do you think building in public is growing? My personal bias is Twitter is, or X is less entrepreneurial in that way and more hot takey. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on just building in public and more than just Twitter, please.
Yeah, Twitter is like one of so many places where people interact. I think YouTube is the much more interesting example here. I think with, the Mr. Beastification of YouTube, that's a whole topic we could talk about for hours here. But it shows us that people want a person. They want to connect not to a brand. They want to connect to the guy, right? They want to connect to the person behind the brand. And this is true for entrepreneurship as well. If you're building a business, people don't really care necessarily about the business as a brand. They want to be connected to the founder. They want to be connected to the person who's building this stuff for them, right? It's like when you have an artisan shoemaker in your town. The shoes are great, obviously, but having a relationship with that guy so you can always go there or girl and get your shoe repaired whenever you need to, or get the new leather when it's in, right? Like that relationship with the professional is like so much more valuable than the actual product in the end. And this trend where the faceless corporation becomes a menace is not just somebody who gives us like, Coca-Cola or cable, like, I don't know, AT&T or whatever. Like if you ever interact with customer support for such a business, you don't feel like you're a partner in the relationship at all. You're just yet another number. They don't care. Right?
Yeah.
I was on the phone with my bank yesterday, which is also one of these kind of institutions. There was some charge. I tried to buy something, the bank decided to block it, and I tried to unblock my card only to get a pre-recorded announcement that they're not working on January 1st. So, call us tomorrow. And I was like, dudes, like this is a business relationship. I run a business, you run a business. You should have somebody taking this call and helping me be able to make purchases, but they don't care. Their system is so big that my problem, this like it doesn't matter. It's a tiny fragment of the issues that they have. And these kind of businesses, they're losing respect with people all over the world. Whereas founder-led, creator-led, or merchant-led businesses, they are growing in reputation. Like personal brands, Mr. Beast, the biggest example that we have in our space, like that is a one-man story. Obviously, it's not. There's a massive team behind him at this point, but he came out of building a brand around himself and all the little things he did along the way, right? The snacks and the items, the merch, the burgers or whatever it is. They are little stories along the way, but Mr. Beast is the main story. And that conceptually is also building in public. Maybe he's a great example for this. He's been building his personal brand and the things that he's doing in public from the start, right? So if this is any indication, and if you ask any child at this point who Mr. Beast is, you get an answer. then this should also be an indication for the development of the industries and the fields in which the people who already know Mr. Beast and all these other great YouTube personalities will eventually enter the workforce or are already in there. So I see this as a trend that keeps moving, that keeps expanding even into other fields. Twitter, sure. Facebook, that's where it's happening too. Reddit has always been the place where it's happening. YouTube is where people are doing more behind the scenes content and commentary and all that, right? You see that as an evolution as well. I don't see this dying down. I see it changing because it becomes more commodified. It becomes more a thing that everybody does. So to be kind of standing out, you have to do more, more different things, and you have to figure out what that exactly means for your particular audience, for your particular field, and the thing that you want to be, the brand that you want to create. But I think just being honest and sharing your journey with people is always going to be a way to build connection. And it's going to be more and more expected from people.
I love that, and I think the key word there is connection. And no, I don't know a single massively large company that is good at connection. Like,
of course not.
Every human. So I was at a business thing this past year, and everyone was talking about how they like having a human on the other end of the helpline. And then these are business owners like, oh, but I'm not going to do that for my business. It's too expensive. And it's such a weird thing to hear humans say is like they value connection themselves. Every human values connection. So if you can, when you're small, at least when you're small, have a connection with people, take feedback seriously, update your blog post, update your tweets, you're providing something that's unique that large companies can't compete with you with.
That's exactly right. And it's hard to scale. Let's be honest. It's hard to scale connection, but you can build a business that at least in this stage where building in public is effective, where you're getting going, where you're building this foundational presence in the field. At least there you can be present. And at least there you can make it about relationships. You can spend that extra minute on a customer service conversation, like in your intercom chat system or whatever you might have, and give that person the feeling that you're actually talking to the founder of the business. I'm trying to take this time to make this happen for you. What can I build for you next? Like, what do you need? Like, what's your issue? What other tools do you have that suck? What can we help there with, right? All these little questions that no normal customer service agent would ever ask. The moment you ask them, like in people's heads, something switches. Suddenly they feel valued. Like we witnessed this with FeedBack Panda when we would tell them, hey, we are the people behind the product. It's just two of us. We're building this for other teachers like us. Flipped a switch. People became friendly. People shared their stories all of a sudden because for the first time ever on a customer service widget, they were treated like people. And if you can give that moment of connection, of just humanity to that person, you can count on them yelling at it, like yelling at their peers from the rooftops about it. This company actually treated me like a human being. You should all check it out. Here's the link. Like how often we saw that with FeedBack Panda is crazy, but that is how it happened. And that is how it happens all over the world with people who actually care.
Arvid, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for your enthusiasm. Thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thanks for letting me share the build in public evangelism. I think more people should do it, and I'm glad I got the opportunity to maybe convince a couple.
And thanks to our listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed Arvid's episode, please hit like and subscribe so that we can continue to bring you insights, knowledge, and experiences from the leading entrepreneurial voices in the software product making world. If you're on the Plugin.fm website, hit subscribe for early bird access to our future content. Or just share the episode on your social media accounts so that we can get the word out and help fellow entrepreneurs on their journeys too. If you're struggling to grow your software revenue, send a note to contact@freemius.com to get free advice from Freemius' monetization experts. My name is Patrick Rolland, and thanks for listening to Plugin.fm.